So most of us, I think we tend to look at a vacation as an escape, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, just getting away from it all.
Right, like we picture ourselves, eating exotic food, taking photos of unfamiliar landscapes, logging out of work.
Finally turning off those email notifications.
Exactly, and, gathering a few funny stories to tell our friends. But what if travel isn't just recreation?
Hmm.
What if, at its absolute core, true travel is actually a violent confrontation with the limits of your own assumptions?
Wow. A violent confrontation. That's a really heavy way to put it, but I think it's spot on.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, welcome everyone, and a very warm welcome specifically to you, the C1 IELTS learner tuning in today.
Yes, welcome.
You're joining us for a special English podcast corner edition of our deep dive. And our mission today is to, well, explore a fascinating set of ideas that will fundamentally challenge how you view the world.
And we're going to do all of this while naturally mastering some pretty advanced English vocabulary and context, right?
Exactly, yeah. We're diving into a document simply titled, Why Traveling Changes the Way We See the World.
It's a great piece. Really thought-provoking.
It really is. And right out of the gate, it throws out this massive hook. It says, we aren't just encountering different buildings or climates when we go abroad.
Right.
We are actually encountering entirely alternative ways of organizing reality itself.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack this.
I mean, it's the perfect place to start, honestly, because when we're at home, the ideas we hold just seem universal, you know?
Oh, totally. Like the behaviors we engage in feel completely natural to us.
Right. We look at our values and we regard them as self-evident, like these timeless truths that apply everywhere.
But then travel takes those so-called timeless truths and reveals that they might actually just be, well, local customs.
Exactly. Every single society creates its own definition of normality. It's not a universal baseline.
And from the moment we are born, we absorb these patterns of behavior, right?
Yeah.
From our families, schools, religions, the media we consume.
Yeah, and the material uses a really great word for that process, one that our C1 learners should definitely try to integrate.
Oh, right. Internalize.
Yes, internalized.
Yeah.
So when something is internalized, it means a cultural pattern is absorbed so deeply that it stops feeling like an external rule.
It just becomes reality. Like you don't wake up and think, I'm going to follow the rules of my culture today.
Right, you don't actively choose it, you just wake up and act.
And what's fascinating is how this internalization fundamentally shapes our view of like a successful human life.
Mm-hmm. Take the contrast between individualistic societies and collectivist societies, for example.
Okay, yeah, let's look at that.
So if you are raised in an individualistic culture, you internalize the idea that personal independence is the ultimate goal, right?
That is your normality. Leaving the family home at 18, choosing your own career path, making massive financial decisions alone.
Exactly. Without having to consult your extended relatives, those are the ultimate signs of maturity in that framework.
Because that model emphasizes the autonomous individual. And autonomous is a great C1 word here.
It is, meaning someone who is self-governing, independent, and completely self-directed.
But then, you travel to a more collectivist society, and that internalized definition of maturity is just flipped completely upside down.
It really is. Suddenly, maturity might mean fulfilling your obligations to your family, or preserving social harmony.
Or deferring to the judgment of your elders.
Right.
And neither model is inherently irrational.
No, not at all. They just reflect fundamentally different understandings of what a human being actually is.
Right. One prioritizes the autonomous individual, while the other prioritizes the individual as a connected node in a wider network.
And this highlights a crucial distinction, I think, between abstract knowledge and direct experience.
How so?
Well, I mean, you can sit in a university classroom and read an anthropology textbook about collectivist family structures. Right?
Sure. You can understand the theory of it perfectly.
Yeah, but abstract knowledge rarely possesses the disruptive force of actually living it.
Oh, that makes sense. Like spending time in a community where multiple generations share a single household.
Exactly. Where your personal success is literally measured by how much you contribute to your relatives.
That direct experience forces a psychological shift that, reading a book simply cannot achieve.
It forces you to confront the really uncomfortable possibility that what you always thought was normal was really just familiar.
That's a great way to put it. I like to think of it like this. The invisible framework of our culture is like the grammar of our native language.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. We use it automatically, completely unaware of its rules, until we suddenly hear someone speaking a completely different language.
And suddenly you realize there's a structure you've been relying on your whole life that you didn't even see.
Exactly. That invisible framework determines everything. What we perceive as polite, what seems rational, what looks beautiful.
Even what feels morally acceptable. Distance reveals that countless other human arrangements are entirely possible.
Take silence, for example. In one cultural framework, silence signifies deep respect and active listening, right?
Yeah, but in another, silence is interpreted as hostility or like a lack of engagement.
Or eye contact. Direct eye contact might mean you are confident and trustworthy.
Or it might mean you are being aggressive or dishonest or inappropriately intimate. It's entirely contextual.
Okay, I get the philosophical awakening part, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
We're talking about this as this beautiful, mind-expanding realization. But practically speaking, isn't it just inherently frustrating when you go abroad and things are done inefficiently?
Oh, right.
Like when you're trying to get a simple task done, like mailing a package or getting a permit, and the system is just completely disorganized.
Well, the frustration is absolutely real in the moment. I'll give you that.
Right, it's maddening.
It is. But the text suggests the issue isn't whether or not you feel frustrated. The issue is the assumption hiding underneath that frustration.
What do you mean?
When travelers feel frustrated, they almost always default to judging the host culture against the standards of their own home.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So you complain that the local people are inefficient or unfriendly or overly intrusive, but what looks like inefficiency to you might actually be a cultural preference for flexibility over speed?
Right, so you're applying a factory floor logic to a society that prioritizes human interaction over scheduling.
Exactly. And what seems unfriendly to a visitor might be a culture that simply doesn't encourage unnecessary conversation between strangers.
Like they might view small talk as superficial, whereas we view it as polite.
Exactly. Or what feels intrusive might stem from a society where asking highly personal questions within 5 minutes of meeting you is a warm expression of interest.
Like asking about your marital status or salary right away.
Yeah, it's not a violation of privacy to them, it's caring. And all of this comes down to what we can call cultural fluency.
Cultural fluency, that's a brilliant concept to highlight for our listeners. Let's dig into that.
Yeah, we usually talk about being fluent in a language, right? Speaking smoothly without hesitation.
Right. But cultural fluency is understanding the unspoken rules of a society.
It's knowing exactly how loudly you're allowed to speak on a public train, or how to interpret someone's tone of voice.
Or whether you should take your shoes off when entering a building. It's the ability to navigate a social environment completely on autopilot.
And travel strips that fluency away instantly.
It's gone.
Yeah, you become uncertain about the most basic, fundamental human actions. Do I tip this person, or is that an insult?
Do I start eating now, or do I wait for a specific cue from the host?
Exactly. A simple smile from a stranger. Does it mean they are friendly? Are they embarrassed? Or are they just being polite while feeling incredibly uncomfortable?
Everyday life basically transforms into this sequence of intense interpretative challenges.
Which is exhausting, honestly. You are constantly running mental calculations for things that used to take zero effort.
And the funny thing is, when we lose that cultural fluency, we also almost always lose our actual literal fluency.
Oh, yes. Encountering language barriers completely reshapes our understanding of intelligence.
It really does. It's one of the most profound, humbling experiences a person can have, I think.
Picture a highly educated traveler, someone with advanced degrees, professional success, deep technical knowledge.
Right.
They go abroad, and suddenly they become entirely incapable of buying a simple train ticket or explaining a minor medical issue to a pharmacist.
Their underlying intellect hasn't dropped a single point, but their ability to display that knowledge has been completely severed by the language barrier.
And this brings up two fantastic words for our C1 learners to lock into their vocabulary: inarticulate and eloquent.
Oh, perfect. So when you're standing at that ticket counter, struggling to express yourself clearly, waving your hands and pointing at a map.
You are completely inarticulate.
Exactly. But back home, in your native tongue, you might be incredibly eloquent.
Meaning fluent, persuasive, expressive, able to articulate highly complex thoughts.
What's fascinating here from the source material is how this temporary loss of competence acts as an empathy engine.
Yeah, experiencing that profound vulnerability should generate a deep empathy for immigrants, international students, or linguistic minorities.
People who navigate this uncertainty not just for a 2-week holiday, but often for years.
It forces the traveler to uncouple linguistic confidence from intellectual ability.
Which we do all the time. We judge people so harshly on their fluency, but dignity and intelligence are completely separate from vocabulary.
They absolutely are. And the mechanics of language go even deeper than that, too.
How so?
Encountering a new language reveals that languages don't just translate words one-to-one, they actually direct our attention differently.
Oh, right. When you start learning another language, you find words that have no precise equivalent in your own.
Yeah, a culture might have a highly specific vocabulary for social hierarchies or nuanced forms of affection or incredibly specific emotional states.
Like honorifics, where the actual grammatical structure of your sentence has to change depending on the age or social status of the person you were speaking to.
Yes, you literally cannot formulate a sentence without first actively assessing where you stand in the social hierarchy relative to the other person.
Which means the language is forcing you to pay attention to social dynamics in a way a different language might not require at all.
Exactly. It doesn't mean speakers of one language are physically incapable of feeling or recognizing what another language describes.
Right.
But if a culture develops a highly specific vocabulary for a certain domain, it trains the speakers of that language to perceive subtle distinctions that an outsider would completely overlook.
So language is essential for navigating the world, but the text points out this paradoxical lesson about travel and language.
Paradoxical. Let's define that for the learners.
Yes, so paradoxical describes a situation or concept that seems completely absurd or self-contradictory on the surface, but might actually contain a profound truth.
And the paradoxical lesson here is that while language is vital, true communication is actually vastly larger than language.
Right, because when vocabulary completely fails, you are forced to rely on everything else.
Facial expressions, gestures, extreme patience, and sheer goodwill.
And the difficulty of that exchange, the mutual struggle to be understood, creates a highly unique kind of intimacy.
You're both cooperating to build a bridge over this gap. Misunderstandings are inevitable, of course.
But a shared laugh over a ridiculous mispronunciation or a wildly misinterpreted gesture can replace embarrassment.
It creates an unexpected connection. You realize you can share almost 0 words with a person, yet still perfectly recognize curiosity, generosity, fear, or kindness in their eyes.
It proves that human connection precedes language.
It really does. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, just as our native language limits how we describe the world, the media we consume limits how we expect the world to look.
Oh, this is such a good transition. Our brains are constantly trying to simplify complex realities.
Which brings us to the shattering of stereotypes and the physicality of history.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because travelers rarely arrive at a destination with a neutral blank slate.
No, never. Our expectations are built long before we ever buy a plane ticket.
They are shaped by decades of films, nightly news broadcasts, political narratives, and advertising.
And the inherent flaw in all of those mediums is that they have to simplify. They reduce entire complex nations to basic, easily digestible symbols.
Right, like a country is either a symbol of extreme prosperity or extreme poverty. It's a symbol of danger or a symbol of pristine safety.
But direct physical experience exposes the inadequacy of those generalizations because reality is deeply contradictory.
Contradictory, that's another powerful C1 word, meaning mutually opposed or fundamentally inconsistent.
Exactly. A country known globally for cutting-edge, futuristic technological innovation might simultaneously contain communities bound by deeply rigid ancient traditions.
Or a region that international news only associates with violent conflict is also filled with ordinary neighborhoods.
Where people are just trying to go to work, celebrate birthdays, and complain about the local traffic.
Right. Direct experience forces you to see that human beings are complex individuals, not just walking, breathing symbols of their government's foreign policy.
You might visit a culture that media tells you is incredibly reserved and cold, and end up having dinner with someone who is remarkably expressive and warm.
It forces the mind to grapple with complexity rather than relying on a two-dimensional flattened image.
Absolutely.
But, let me challenge that premise for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If travel is supposed to break stereotypes, what happens if a traveler goes abroad and has one singular, truly terrible encounter with a local? Like, say they get scammed, or someone is incredibly rude to them on their very first day. Doesn't that isolated incident just immediately reinforce whatever prejudice they arrived with?
You know, it's a very real danger. Unfamiliar, negative events are highly memorable to the human brain. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism.
Right, we're wired to remember the bad stuff.
So a traveler can very easily take one isolated, unpleasant incident and interpret it as definitive evidence of a widespread cultural flaw.
I was overcharged for a taxi, therefore this entire nation is dishonest.
Exactly. So how do you avoid falling into that trap? Because, as you said, it happens all the time.
The source material suggests it requires what we can call intellectual discipline.
Yes. The educational value of travel isn't automatic. It depends entirely on this discipline.
Meeting 5 people in a coffee shop does not reveal the character of 50 million people.
And spending a week in a heavily curated English-speaking tourist district in a capital city does not make you a geopolitical expert on that nation's culture.
Travel only weakens stereotypes when it is paired with deep self-awareness. You have to actively ask yourself, how did my prior expectations influence the way I just interpreted that interaction?
You have to monitor your own reactions in real time.
And this idea of intellectual discipline extends beautifully to how we experience history.
It really does. For most of us, history is just an abstract text, right?
Yeah, it's a list of names, dates, treaties, and battles in a high school textbook.
But travel transforms history from an abstract sequence into a physical reality. The distance collapses, and the past becomes spatial.
Spatial. That is a vital word for our listeners. It relates to space, physical geography, and three-dimensional reality.
So when history becomes spatial, you aren't just reading about a political prisoner.
You are standing inside their cell. You're feeling how cold the stone is, seeing how little light comes through the window.
You aren't just reading about a famous battle. You are looking at the narrowness of the trench, observing the high ground.
And suddenly you understand, physically, spatially, why the battle happened exactly the way it did.
It makes the abstract visceral. But there's another layer here. Monuments and historical sites don't just passively preserve memory, they actively shape it.
Right, they are arguments carved in stone. Which brings up another excellent C1 word, contested?
Yes, contested. Historical sites reveal that the past is contested, meaning it is disputed, argued over, and the subject of intense disagreement.
This is a crucial observation from the text, and we have to look at this impartially, as we always do.
Absolutely. The point here is that governments, institutions, and victors make conscious, deliberate decisions about which events deserve public recognition.
They decide which historical figures are elevated onto pedestals with statues, and which historical atrocities are minimized, rephrased, or entirely omitted from the national museums.
A single statue in a city square can represent immense, unifying national pride to one specific demographic.
While representing historical trauma and oppression to another group walking past it every day.
Or a museum exhibit about a colonial era might frame it as a narrative of civilizational progress, or as a narrative of pure exploitation, or as a highly complex intersection of both.
The street names, the public holidays, the memorials, they are all physical manifestations of ongoing, contested struggles over who gets to define the national identity.
The profound takeaway for the traveler is what happens when you visit multiple countries and encounter radically different, sometimes mutually exclusive accounts of the exact same historical conflict.
Every nation tends to emphasize its own suffering, its own heroism, or its own innocence.
And this isn't to say every interpretation is equally factually accurate. Facts still exist. But it reveals that the narrative of history is inseparable from perspective.
Right. The lesson isn't necessarily to figure out the one pure, objective version of the past, but to learn to recognize the politics of memory.
You learn to return home, look at the history you were taught in your own schools, and ask, what was omitted here?
Whose voices were completely absent from this narrative?
And this realization that narratives, history, and physical spaces are deeply shaped by power and perspective brings us directly to the uncomfortable realities of modern-day power and wealth disparities.
Because a tourist stepping into these spaces inevitably encounters the sharp edge of global inequality.
It's unavoidable. This is where travel fundamentally transforms how we perceive wealth, poverty, and our overall quality of life.
It starts by holding up a mirror to highly consumerist societies. Let's make sure our learners have a grip on that word. Consumerist.
Good idea. A consumerist society is one completely preoccupied with buying goods, where wealth and personal success are frequently measured through the constant material accumulation of new things.
In a consumerist framework, a successful life is equated with possessing a larger home, the newest vehicle, upgraded technology, and fashionable clothing.
And the entire advertising infrastructure of these societies actively encourages people to experience constant dissatisfaction as a normal state of being.
Because if you are satisfied, you stop buying.
Exactly. A newer version of whatever you own is always about to be released, rendering your current possessions psychologically obsolete.
But then, a traveler from that environment enters a community with much lower levels of material consumption.
Initially, the traveler probably only notices the deficit. The buildings are smaller, the public infrastructure might be lacking, people own far fewer personal possessions.
But prolonged contact, assuming the traveler has that intellectual discipline we mentioned, reveals alternative forms of wealth that are incredibly difficult to quantify on an economic spreadsheet.
These alternative forms of wealth can be deeply striking. A community might have significantly more time to dedicate to family and leisure.
They might possess much stronger, more deeply integrated relationships with their neighbors, providing a social safety net that money simply can't buy.
Children might be free to play collectively in pedestrian public spaces rather than being isolated and constantly supervised indoors.
Older generations might remain deeply integrated into daily family life instead of facing the severe social isolation that plagues so many wealthy nations.
We have to be very careful here, though.
I agree. I want to raise an important ethical check based on the source. We cannot romanticize poverty.
Absolutely not.
It is incredibly dangerous to look at someone's lack of resources and call it charming or picturesque just because their simpler lifestyle looks aesthetically pleasing to an outsider who gets to fly home to a comfortable house.
The text explicitly warns us about this. We must distinguish between simplicity and deprivation.
Deprivation, that's the damaging lack of material benefits considered to be basic necessities in a society.
True poverty involves real malnutrition, real physical insecurity, inadequate health care, and heavily restricted opportunities for education and advancement.
It is highly irresponsible to treat genuine deprivation as a charming spiritual lifestyle choice.
So if the lesson isn't poverty is spiritually superior, what is the actual takeaway about wealth?
The takeaway lies in understanding the distinction between comfort and fulfillment.
Right. Material abundance comfort is undeniably valuable because it eliminates very specific physical forms of suffering.
You don't have to worry about freezing or starving or dying of a preventable disease.
But comfort does not generate meaning. A society can be materially incredibly wealthy, completely comfortable, while simultaneously suffering from mass loneliness, severe anxiety, chronic overwork, and total social fragmentation.
The crucial question the traveler learns to ask isn't a binary, is wealth good or bad, but rather, what is this prosperity actually enabling?
Does this wealth create time, security, dignity, and human connection? Or does it simply accelerate our stress and our consumption?
Travel complicates the simple equation between high income and high human success.
It does, but we also have to move from the philosophical to the highly practical here by looking at the severe inequality that the global tourism industry itself relies upon.
The stark reality is that tourism often brings people from the wealthiest societies into direct daily contact with the people who are paid very little to serve them.
The hotel employees, the cleaners, the drivers, the local guides.
There is an immense ethical discomfort in realizing that a tourist's daily budget for entertainment and dining might easily exceed a local worker's entire monthly income.
And this introduces one of the most vital concepts for understanding global travel: structural privilege.
Structural privilege. That refers to the immense advantages a person possesses, not because of their personal merit, how hard they work, or their individual courage,
But purely because of systemic, institutional, and political factors they were born into.
The ultimate, undeniable example of structural privilege in travel is passport power, the literal political ability to cross a border.
It is the ultimate dividing line. Some passports allow their holders to walk into dozens, even hundreds of countries with minimal difficulty.
You book a flight, you arrive, you get a stamp, you walk through. It's frictionless.
Meanwhile, other passports subject their holders to lengthy, humiliating visa applications, massive non-refundable fees, intense interrogations, deep suspicion of their motives, and ultimately high rates of arbitrary rejection.
Think about this hypothetical. You could have two people with the exact same level of intelligence, the exact same income, and the exact same burning curiosity about the world.
But only one of them has the political freedom to actually explore it.
And this completely shatters the narrative we constantly see pushed on social media.
No, social media. It frames travel as this ultimate marker of personal achievement. If you travel a lot, it means you are courageous, ambitious, adventurous, and open-minded.
While in reality, the capacity to travel is heavily dictated by global inequality. by your nationality, your geopolitical standing, and your class.
Recognizing this structural privilege forces humility. It teaches the traveler that their freedom to explore isn't just a matter of having a positive, adventurous attitude.
It is supported, or heavily restricted, by massive global institutions over which they have zero control.
Exactly. And having the privilege of time and money fundamentally changes how we are able to spend that time when we are on holiday.
Which introduces a really interesting tension. The urge to rush and see everything versus the profound educational value of slowing down and embracing discomfort.
This requires a total reassessment of how we experience time. Different societies literally experience time differently. Let's look at punctuality.
Punctuality is the fact or quality of being strictly on time.
Right. In many Northern European or North American cultures, punctuality is deeply internalized as a strict moral obligation.
If you arrive 15 minutes late, you are essentially stealing someone else's time. It is a profound sign of disrespect. Efficiency and predictability are the highest values.
But in other cultures, time is interpreted as a much more flexible, organic medium.
In these societies, an event simply begins when the relevant people have arrived.
A conversation doesn't abruptly end just because the clock strikes the top of the hour. It ends when the conversation reaches a natural conclusion.
The priority is the human relationship, not strict adherence to a printed schedule.
And neither approach is objectively neutral or universally correct. A schedule-centered culture is phenomenal for achieving remarkable logistical coordination.
Trains run on time, supply chains function smoothly. But it produces immense psychological stress and the constant nagging feeling that you are permanently behind schedule.
While a relationship-centered culture fosters deep human connection and patience, but it can create significant uncertainty and logistical inefficiency.
The friction happens when a traveler accustomed to rigid schedules goes to a flexible time culture. They get infuriated.
They interpret a 40-minute delay for a bus as a sign of incompetence or disrespect.
Meanwhile, the locals are looking at the traveler's intense, visible impatience and viewing it as incredibly rude, childish, and excessive.
And modern tourism often exacerbates this friction. Tourism frequently reproduces the absolute worst aspects of the rushing, schedule-centered mindset.
Travelers try to cram as many attractions as possible into a 4-day itinerary, turning exploration into a literal race against the clock.
Tourism often treats a beautiful, complex, thousands of years old city like a product on a factory conveyor belt.
The goal is just to consume it as fast as possible before it passes by. You photograph a monument, but you don't actually observe it.
You eat a meal as quickly as possible just because your spreadsheet says you have another destination waiting.
You come home with a camera roll of 1,000 high-definition images, but almost zero actual visceral memories of how the air smelled or how the pavement felt.
This is exactly why there is a growing movement advocating for slow travel.
Right, slow travel. That means choosing to remain in one place for a much longer period.
It allows you to move beyond the initial superficial spectacle of a place. You start to recognize the daily rhythms.
You go to the same local cafe 3 days in a row and the barista actually recognizes you.
You figure out the local public transport routes instead of just taking taxis everywhere. You see how the light changes in a residential neighborhood at different times of day.
The destination stops being a consumer product to be checked off a list and becomes a lived reality.
And part of that lived reality, and this is where it gets challenging, involves actively embracing discomfort.
Modern tourism is essentially a multi-billion-dollar industry entirely dedicated to eliminating all discomfort.
We stay in identical international hotel chains where the room looks exactly the same whether you're in Tokyo or Toronto.
We seek out familiar food. We use translation apps so we never have to struggle for a word. We move through carefully managed, sanitized environments.
Those services are incredibly convenient, absolutely, but that convenience completely insulates people from the very places they spent so much money and carbon emissions to visit.
The bold reality is that truly transformative travel actively requires some degree of discomfort.
It requires the bus to break down. It requires your hotel reservation to get lost in the system at midnight.
It requires you to get totally turned around and lost in a labyrinth of a city where you can't read the street signs. But why? Why is that temporary misery actually a good thing?
Because it forces you to deal with ambiguity.
Ambiguity. That's a great term for our C1 learners. It's the quality of being open to more than one interpretation. It means a lack of strict clarity, a situation where the outcome is completely uncertain.
When your routine life fails, you are plunged into ambiguity. This reveals capacities you didn't even know you possessed.
You have to learn to improvise. You have to swallow your pride, let go of your ego, and ask a total stranger for help using nothing but hand gestures and a map.
You discover that panic is significantly less useful than patience.
Discomfort provides continuous, unfiltered feedback about your own personality. How do you actually react when you lose control of your environment?
Do you become aggressive and blame everyone around you? Do you become helpless and passive? Or do you take a breath and figure it out?
Facing this repeated uncertainty builds profound psychological flexibility. You stop being so intensely attached to having a perfect plan.
You realize that a mistake doesn't equal a disaster.
Over time, it's often those unexpected disasters, the missed train, the torrential rainstorm, the terrible meal you ordered by accident, that become the most memorable and cherished stories of the entire journey.
Though we should probably add a quick disclaimer here. There is a difference between constructive discomfort and actual danger.
Oh, for sure. Recklessness is not the same as courage, and preventable suffering isn't automatically educational.
The useful form of discomfort isn't wandering into a dangerous situation. It is simply the temporary loss of complete, rigid control over your environment.
And treating a destination merely as a comfortable product to be consumed quickly doesn't just harm the traveler's psychological experience. It actually causes tangible, ethical, and environmental harm to the destination itself.
Which brings us to the ethics of looking and the environmental contradictions of travel.
This is a heavy, deeply necessary conversation. We have to examine what we can call the ethically problematic nature of the tourist gaze.
Traveling changes not just what we see, but how we look at things. Tourists often view places purely aesthetically.
Aesthetic is a crucial C1 vocabulary word. It means concerned with beauty, or the appreciation of beauty.
It is looking at something purely for its visual appeal, its composition, its lighting.
A tourist will look at a crowded, chaotic market, or a crumbling, aging building, or an impoverished rural village, and find it visually fascinating or dramatic.
The ethical problem arises when that aesthetic gaze turns people's actual homes into mere scenery.
It turns genuine poverty into photographic material for a highly curated social media post.
It treats local people who are just going about their daily lives trying to survive as if they are just colorful background characters placed there to enhance the visitor's composition.
Think about the intensely unequal power dynamic of a camera lens. The camera creates a massive emotional distance.
The traveler has the structural privilege and the financial power to arrive, observe, record the scene, and then pack up and leave to go back to their air-conditioned hotel.
But the people being observed have to remain in those conditions. The visitor is temporarily consuming their reality as an experience.
Therefore, ethical travel requires profound restraint. Just because something is visible does not mean it should be photographed.
Just because a door is open does not mean it should be entered.
Not every single local tradition or religious ceremony exists for the entertainment of outsiders.
Local communities have the absolute right to define the boundaries of access, and travelers must constantly remember they are guests, not owners of the experience.
And from the ethics of the camera, we zoom out to an even larger, almost impossible contradiction: the environmental impact of travel.
It is a deep, painful contradiction for anyone who loves the world.
On one hand, travel can create a profound emotional appreciation for the natural world.
A person standing in front of a rapidly melting glacier understands the reality of climate change in their bones in a way that reading statistics on a screen simply cannot replicate.
A diver swimming over a bleached coral reef feels the fragility of the ecosystem intensely.
But, and here is the massive paradox, the very act of traveling to see these natural wonders directly contributes to their destruction.
This brings in our next vocabulary word: degradation. Degradation is the condition or process of degrading or deteriorating, specifically referring to the environment.
Long-haul aviation produces massive carbon emissions. Cruise ships generate incredible amounts of pollution and localized waste, and hyper-popular natural spots suffer from severe habitat destruction, just from the sheer volume of foot traffic.
You are flying across the world burning fossil fuels to look at a glacier that is melting because of fossil fuels.
It's a tough reality to sit with. And realistically, this contradiction cannot be solved purely through individual guilt.
The massive environmental impact of tourism is deeply tied up in global energy policies, airline subsidies, corporate practices, and a lack of international regulation.
However, travelers still have choices they can make to mitigate their impact. We aren't entirely powerless.
Travelers can choose to fly less frequently, but stay in a destination much longer when they do, shifting from 4 weekend trips a year to 1 month-long trip.
They can use lower-emission transport, like domestic trains, where practical, prioritize locally owned businesses and guest houses so the financial benefit actually stays in the community, and radically reduce their unnecessary consumption of single-use plastics while abroad.
But the most important solution is a philosophical shift. Travelers have to actively reject the modern, algorithm-driven assumption that every desire to travel must be satisfied immediately.
We have to reject the culture of constant travel that treats the entire globe as an infinite collection of experiences waiting to be consumed.
Places are not products, and accessing them is not an unlimited, unconditional human right.
So if a traveler actually internalizes all of this, they navigate the language barriers, they grapple with contested history, they recognize their structural privilege, they embrace the ambiguity of discomfort, and they travel ethically and slowly, where does that leave them?
The real shock is that the most profound change actually happens after the suitcase is unpacked, back at home.
The journey inward. This deals with identity, home, and moral imagination.
There is a fascinating psychological truth about human beings. We generally believe we have a highly stable personality.
You think of yourself as the shy one, or the confident one, or the highly organized one.
But travel reveals that identity is actually, to a large extent, situational.
You see this all the time. Someone who is incredibly quiet and reserved in their native environment suddenly becomes highly expressive, outgoing, and adventurous abroad.
Simply because they feel liberated from the heavy expectations of the people who have known them for 20 years.
Or conversely, a confident, type A professional who relies on systems back home suddenly becomes incredibly anxious and timid when they can't communicate basic needs.
This happens because a foreign city offers anonymity. Anonymity is the condition of being completely unknown to the people around you.
When you step off a train in a city of 10 million people, you are a ghost. Nobody knows your past failures, your family dramas, your professional rank, or your social status.
This total anonymity creates a psychological space where you can experiment with entirely different versions of yourself.
The journey ultimately becomes a mirror. It doesn't just show you the external world, it reflects the person moving through it.
It provides the unique conditions in which your own identity can finally be examined from the outside.
But there is a strong warning here about the danger of superficial transformation.
Superficial means existing or occurring only at the surface, lacking any real depth, thoroughness, or genuine meaning.
You can visit 50 different countries and remain entirely arrogant, rigid, and closed-minded.
We all know that traveler. The one
Yeah.
who stays inside curated tourist bubbles, only talks to other expatriates or tourists, and treats the number of countries they've visited as a competitive status symbol.
Just a checklist to brag about at dinner parties. They claim to be an absolute authority on complex geopolitical issues after spending exactly 3 days in a capital city.
Physical movement across borders creates confidence, but it does not automatically produce understanding.
True transformation requires rigorous reflection. Experience alone doesn't teach you anything unless you actively interpret that experience, question your own knee-jerk reactions, and possess the humility to recognize when you are dead wrong.
Without reflection, travel just confirms whatever prejudices you already packed in your bag. But at its best, with reflection, travel expands our moral imagination.
Moral imagination. That is perhaps the most vital, culminating concept of this entire discussion.
Moral imagination is the ability to genuinely understand that other people experience the world from positions, cultural frameworks, and constraints that are vastly different from our own, and to grant those differences deep respect.
It is about giving abstract political or economic issues a human face. Migration isn't just a loud debate on the evening news once you've actually shared a meal with a family separated by a border.
Economic inequality is no longer just a sterile statistic when you've seen the daily, grueling physical labor required to produce the inexpensive goods we buy without a second thought.
And this expanded moral imagination replaces simple, binary judgments with tension.
Before traveling deeply, a person might divide the world into neat, simple categories. This country is safe, that one is dangerous, this one is rich, that one is poor, this one is modern, that one is backwards.
Experience shatters those simple categories. You learn that a wealthy country can have immaculate infrastructure, but suffer from a terrifying epidemic of social isolation.
A poorer community might lack reliable public services, but possess incredibly strong, beautiful, resilient networks of mutual support.
Travel teaches you that a society can be deeply admirable and deeply flawed at the exact same time.
Certainty is psychologically comfortable, which is why we cling to it so fiercely. But certainty usually depends on deliberately omitting inconvenient facts.
The more a traveler learns, the more they develop intellectual caution. They stop making grand universal claims about how the world works and start using phrases like, in my limited experience, or under these specific circumstances.
Which perfectly sets up the final, often painful phase of the journey. Reverse culture shock.
Reverse culture shock is the profound psychological disorientation a person experiences when they return to their home country after a significant time away.
Returning travelers suddenly notice details about their home that used to be completely invisible. They might deeply appreciate things they previously took for granted, like clean tap water, reliable electricity, or political stability.
But simultaneously, the weaknesses and blind spots of their home country become glaringly obvious.
They might suddenly be intensely frustrated by the rampant social inequality, the environmental neglect, or the casual cultural intolerance they see around them every day.
Home appears both more valuable and more imperfect simultaneously.
And the hardest part is that the people around you haven't changed. They haven't gone through this psychological unspooling.
So you try to explain these profound emotional shifts, and to your friends and family, the stories just sound repetitive or pretentious.
You feel displaced. You are physically sitting on your own couch, in your own living room, but psychologically you are caught entirely between worlds.
But over time, this discomfort becomes highly productive. You learn to synthesize perspectives.
You realize you don't have to choose between blindly loving your home or bitterly criticizing it.
You can appreciate its unique strengths while remaining sharply aware that alternative and sometimes significantly better ways of organizing human life exist elsewhere.
If we distill all of this insight into a single core takeaway for our listeners, it is this. The ultimate defining lesson of travel is the journey from a state of comfortable certainty to a state of liberating uncertainty.
A mature traveler does not return home with the naive, overly simplistic belief that everywhere is exactly the same deep down.
That conclusion just erases the very real, beautiful, and sometimes difficult differences between us.
Nor do they return believing that every cultural practice is equally admirable, because cultural understanding doesn't require us to completely abandon our own moral compass.
Instead, they return with a much more demanding, nuanced form of judgment.
They combine their own ethical convictions with historical awareness, intense curiosity, and above all, profound humility.
They realize that no single culture, especially not their own, holds all the answers to the human condition, but every culture understands something incredibly well.
It is the willingness to be altered. The world becomes larger, not just because you have physically moved across more square miles of it, but because your mind has finally accepted that reality can be organized in ways you previously could not even imagine.
And once you truly learn that lesson, you can never look at your home, at strangers on the street, or at the person in the mirror in the exact same way again.
So to wrap up this English podcast Corner Deep Dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on everything we've explored today.
Think about this as you go about your week.
If true travel proves that our most deeply held, unquestioned normalities are often just highly specific local customs, what deeply held, unquestionable belief are you clinging to right now that a single trip across the world might completely and utterly dismantle?
Keep questioning, keep learning.
And keep expanding that moral imagination. See you next time.